Why, hello there. Welcome back. Thanks for joining me again. Today we want to continue working on our little shack. Just FYI, I did notice last time that I had missed this little guy. I forgot to mirror him, so I went ahead and did that off screen. So again, today I want to keep working on our little shack, but first I just wanted to touch base on a few of the tools that I've been working that I haven't really shed any light on, and those are the function keys. Oops. So all of these, I think I've gone over a few of these, and some are not applicable to NanoCad, so I'm gonna just try to go through some of these real quick. So starting off with F1. F1's pretty standard throughout a lot of software. F1's just the help window comes out here. F2, as I mentioned earlier, so you have your command line down here, and you could kind of scroll up to see the history of your commands and even your inputs. F2, all it does is bring that in a window form, easier to see. F2 toggles it off as well. F3 toggles your object snap. So for example, if I'm drawing a line, I could snap to that endpoint, to midpoint, endpoints, stuff like that, depending on the object that I'm snapping to. For example, I could also snap to a center of a circle, stuff like that. So F3 turns it off. For whatever reason, I've noticed that this little icon doesn't change when you turn it off using the function key, but it is off. And I'm going to toggle it back on. Okay, now it's on. I'm just going to leave it on for now. Alright. F4, F5, and F6 are not really applicable to NanoCad, or at least not our version of NanoCad, but they are to AutoCAD. So let me go ahead and go over them real quick. F4 does the exact same thing as F3, except in the 3D space. NanoCad doesn't really have 3D modeling. So this is not applicable to, at least not to what we're going to use, but AutoCAD does have that functionality. AutoCAD also toggles or actually cycles through the ISO plane. I might get into that a little later. Again, this is not on NanoCAD, so let's not worry about it. Also, AutoCAD, and I would assume newer versions of NanoCAD as well, have something called the Dynamic User Coordinate System, or DUCS, D-U-C-S. Essentially, whenever you hover over an object like a line or something, the DUCS gives you some basic information about those lines or squares, or sorry, lines or rectangles or what have you. Again, not on NanoCAD, so we don't have to worry about it. I'm going to skip F8. I'll get back to F8 here in a bit, but F7 and F9 are grid and snap, respectively, and they're pretty straightforward. So F7 toggles the grid, so now you have grid in the background. You have it down here. If you right click it, you could actually set the grid steps. So it's asking you what you want the grid steps to be. Currently they're 10 by 10, but if I'm being honest, I don't really use the grid, so I'm just going to turn that back off. Actually, before I turn it off, the snap, which is right here, it goes hand in hand with the grid. Let me show you how. So now when I start a line command, you'll notice that I could pretty much move my cursor anywhere. But if I turn the snap on, it's off by default, and personally I never really turn it on. But if I turn the snap on, notice what happens. Now my cursor is locked into, kind of locks onto those intersections. And again, just like grid, you could also change the spacing on them, set snap steps. Yeah, again, they're set to the same as the grid, 10 by 10. Also, just to point this out, notice that it snaps to the same as the grid, but you don't have to have the grid on, and snap will still function without it. Again, I don't really use this function, so I just have it off by default. I just turned it off again. I'm going to escape out of this. So going back to ortho F8, it's an option that allows you to lock your cursor in an orthogonal orientation. So again, I'm going to start the line command. Notice how I could pretty much move the cursor all around. If I press F8, I lock it horizontally and vertically. Also, I could also make something, I could change the plane. So ISO plane, this changes it to an isometric view. And I'm going to select SEISO, so southeast isometric plane. Again, NanoCad, at least our version of NanoCad, I don't think has a 3D capability, but it can kind of change the orientation of the plane to represent 3D objects in 2D space. It's not the same as 3D modeling, but this is where ortho comes in handy. And I have it on, so I could draw a line, and I could draw this cube looking thing. By the way, I'm gonna go over this as well, but what I'm doing here, how I'm tracking off of that endpoint, that tracking line, that is something called, oops, missed that one. I'm just gonna start from here to here. There we go. That is called object tracking. And I'm just gonna trim this last part, TR, enter, enter again. Oops. I'm gonna fillet radius. What's going on? Anyway, I'm just gonna move it here. I'm gonna start a line from here to here. So I've modeled. You could model again 3D objects in 2D space, and it's made a lot easier with ortho. Of course, if you go back. So I'm going to go back to View, Views, Plan View, current UCS. Notice we modeled kind of like a cube, but from the top you just see a square. I'm going to erase that. We're not really going to need it. But I mentioned another one called Object Track. So the last two are polar tracking and object tracking. Notice that whenever I start a line command, oops, sorry, let me turn ortho off. When I start a line command, I could pretty much move the cursor anywhere I want, right? F10 is polar tracking down here. I'm going to press F10 to turn that on. Now notice how it kind of snaps to every 45-degree increments. And that is the polar tracking, and you could actually change those increments by right-clicking this and bringing up this menu, and yeah, you could change it to 90 degrees, 45, 30, 22, what have you. Object track is very similar to polar track, except polar track starts from your very first point. Like, let's say I'm starting this line command, it starts from the very first point. Object track depends on another object. So for example, if I kind of hover over this, I could track this way, I could track this way. Again, it's dependent on this other object. In this case, it's the big square around our frame. Okay. Anyway, those are the function keys in a nutshell. Again, as we go along, I might dig down a little bit deeper. But for now, let's keep working on our little shed here. Okay, so the first thing I want to do, I want to get into the correct layers. So I'm going to unfreeze the wall and the doors and windows. I'm going to get into my walls layer, and I'm going to freeze my framing just because I'm not going to need it for now. Before we go on, what I want to do is I want to change the orientation of this door, I want it to be up front here just because it's my front door, and I've already established that this view is going to be my front view. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to move it, and I'm going to track off of that corner 2 inches to the right. 2, enter. Okay. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to click this, start the rotate command, and I'm going to rotate about, well, I kind of want it to open inward, but then I would have it here, but I want the swing to be similar to what it is now. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to orient it this way, and I'm going to mirror it. Mirror this, specify first point of mirror line. I'm just going to say here to here. Now it's going to ask again, erase source object. This time, because I don't want two doors back to back, I just want the one. I will erase the source object. So yes on this one. And that is the correct orientation. As a matter of fact, you know what? I think I'm going to save it as its own block. I'm going to say this is, I think it was a 2'8". I'm going to say mirrored. Specify on screen. I'm going to specify this point. There you go. By the way, while I'm here, if for whatever reason, I'm just going to copy this over. If for whatever reason you wanted to revert this back into its base components, all you have to do is explode it. And the command for that is very simple. It's just X. Explode. So I'm going to start the command X for explode. Okay, explode. Select entities, select objects. So I'm going to select this. And now, look at this. If we select this, it just has one blue grip. But now if we select this, whoops, maybe it didn't explode all the way. Let's see. There you go. Yeah. So now if we select this, we have one blue grip. This has endpoints, midpoint, and a center point. This has the door itself and the two lines, so it got reverted to its base components. Anyway, just wanted to throw that in there as well. Erase this. Okay, yeah, thanks for sticking around. Next, we're going to keep working on our shed, and we're going to add some electrical components. Thank you.